Rosie, written by Jonathan Dunne, narrated for you by the author. Dedication to Ruth. For all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest are these, it might have been. John Greenleaf Whittier. Prologue. A wish. The five friends left their childhoods down the well under the stairs, only a week after the squatters abandoned the house on the hill. The night didn't start like any other night in July, and it didn't end like any other night. At 3 a.m. on the 14th of July, 1993, 5 flashlights blinked on and off outside Rosie Ryan's house on Oldcastle's Church Street. She could see them on the street below from her bedroom window. Rosie had been waiting for them to arrive and hadn't slept a wink, counting down the luminous red numerals on her Sony cube clock. The 5 silhouettes belonging to Pat 1, Pat 2, Dave, Rob and Peter stood behind those flashing torches. Rosie half waved back and considered the little rucksack sitting on her bed that she'd prepared earlier. A bottle of peach schnapps and Mars bars at the ready. She didn't have any technical equipment with her. That was Pat 1's area. He and his father liked to go mountain climbing in their spare time. Pat 1 had the ropes and she couldn't recall the fancy words he'd used to describe the equipment for the descent. He didn't use common expressions like going down the well. They had already been in the house a few nights previously, including Rosie. That was the night they found the well in the room with the weird door. Tonight was to be the night they discovered what was down that well. Going up to that house on Bucks Hill was everything now. Rosie had wanted nothing so badly in all her life. It was their last year together. In just a few weeks, everyone would go their separate ways to university, college, work, wherever, whatever. Things would be different when this summer ended. Just how different, Rosie and her 5 friends would have never guessed. With a heavy heart, Rosie pointed to the ventilator mask covering her mouth and nose, then shook her head, showing to her besties on the quiet street below that they should count her out for the second phase of their plan because she was having an impromptu asthma attack. Rosie was giddy, but she wasn't silly. She needed her medication. Sure, she could bring along her inhalers, but not her buzzing nebulizer strapped to her face right now, pumping a misty solution of Ventolin into her lungs through a tube from the machine propped on the bedside locker. Rosie knew how to control her asthma, but tonight of all nights she needed the nebulizer. In those early days, Rosie had no reason to consider anything sinister was at play. On the street below, the 4 spotted the nebulizer mask strapped to Rosie's face, telling the boys that the only female member of their gang wouldn't be going anywhere tonight. She was having one of her infamous asthma attacks. Asthma defined their friend. She carried a brown and blue inhaler everywhere she went. "Jesus," said Pat 2. "Wheezy strikes again." "We don't need her anyway," commented Rob. Dave said, "But Wheezy's got the Mars bars." "Fuck the Mars bars," cursed Peter. "It's the peach schnapps I'm worried about. We all chipped in for that bottle. I was looking forward to a tipple to calm my nerves before the descent. I'm already shitting a brick over here." Peter held out his trembling hands to prove his point. "Give her a break," Pat 1 suggested. "She was looking forward to tonight more than any of us. I can guarantee you one thing, Wheezy's way more pissed off than we are. I feel sorry for her. Maybe she'll grow out of her asthma sometime." "Yeah," interrupted Pat 2, "but it's not going to be tonight." On that point, they were all in agreement. Her friends turned from the window and marched off down the street. She'd let them down. Rosie cursed her asthma. Dr. McCoy better be right. He told her she would eventually grow out of it. But thanks to her asthma, Rosie was saved a lifetime of traumas and PTSD that Pat 1, Pat 2, Rob, Peter and Dave would never outgrow. They left their childhoods down the sour well on that July night. Yoo-hoo, Earth calling Rosie. Come in, Rosie. Part 1. Unfair Funfair. 1. Deadly Nightshade. Yoo-hoo, Earth calling Rosie. Come in, Rosie. Rosie Ryan snapped from her train of thought. She was down the well when she heard her husband's echoing voice. Sorry? Oh, my apologies. I just took a stroll down memory lane. You just took a stroll down the well? Rosie looked about, almost surprised to find herself standing at the front door of the same house her friends had never really come back from. She could see her 5 friends through her bedroom window, fading away into the night as they walked to the end of Church Street and took a left. It was a prophetic night, only Rosie hadn't known it then. She wasn't meant to go down the well. On that night. Her besties faded away that night forever in a spiritual sense. Whatever was down there robbed them of their innocence. The woman in her late 50s standing next to Rosie's husband, Victor, said, Age will do that to you, dear. There comes a point in everyone's life when the years fly by. Adding with an ominous air, it's an illusion, of course. There was something different about the boho lady, how she introduced herself to property investors Rosie and Victor Ryan on that sweltering 14th of July. The doubt she stirred came in the pause before giving her name. Anyone would think Elsie wasn't her name, but it just happened to be so on this sultry afternoon, which until now seemed like any other Friday afternoon. But for now, the real estate dream team wasn't too worried. It wouldn't be the first time a client gave them a fake name before taking a tour of Wishing Well House. The morbidly curious came around once in a while, letting on they were interested in buying the infamous property. Wiping his brow, Victor announced, Boy, what a view! No amount of money can buy this. From up here on the bogland of Buck's Hill, they had a clear view of Oldcastle. The Norman castle in the town square was visible. To the right of it, the concrete chunk known as the water reservoir. Far off in the horizon, the twin peaks of Magrique Mountain came from the shimmering haze like a mirage. And in its bowels, a haunted cave the locals called Crazy Daisy. The silence up here was profound, bordering on mystical. On the light breeze came the chiming song of a skylark out on the peatland. 3 million can buy it. Their client was quick to come back with her witty reply. Victor laughed off the comment. That smile never faltered, and the Ryans were thinking it was just the shape of her face. The smile ironed out the fluff, flab, and wrinkles that come creeping in with age. Elsie possessed one of those timeless faces. Below in the distance, the Ryans and their client tracked a juggernaut rumbling along the New Line Road towards Oldcastle. A convoy of trucks carried colourful funfair rides and a carousel. Wow, commented Rosie. It's that time of year again. The funfair comes to Oldcastle every July, she informed Elsie. Time flies. It sure does, said Victor. They already have the roller coaster built. The Coiling Cobra, if my memory serves me correctly. It's huge. This must be the rest of it. Victor asked the woman, Do you like the funfair? I used to love the funfair, but I grew old somewhere along the way. That's the scariest ride of all. There was a brief silence just then. Rosie and Victor were in their late 40s, but could appreciate the woman's comment. The most daring thing I do these days is take swimming lessons. That and other things. Well, said Rosie's husband, I invite you to go for a ride in the bumper cars. 360 turns are my forte. I might take you up on that, she answered, eyeing the house behind her. But getting back to the tour of the house, I should tell you that I'm not interested in what's outside the house. I'm more interested in what's inside it. I can see for myself that the plot is very pretty and does have priceless views. There was a double entendre in there somewhere. It was difficult to know if she was being sarcastic or not, but the Ryans were in selling mode now, and it didn't matter a damn. But something was playing on Rosie's conscience. Despite Elsie's calm manner and flowing flowery vibes, Rosie was sure the woman wasn't being honest with them. Even as she'd driven up the driveway, the real estate investor suspected that today's viewing client was going to be a little special. She knew it was never a good idea to judge a person by what they wore, but her flamboyant dress style was the first clue, telling Rosie that the woman wasn't afraid to assert herself. She sported a flowing boho floral dress and a pair of snazzy rainbow tie-up sandals to the ethnic colourful flavour. Slung over her shoulder was a large bohemian-style shoulder bag with rhinestones, tassels, and a giant synthetic peacock eye that stared back at Rosie as her gaze flitted across it. Elsie's curly waves of lilac-grey hair further lent to her exotic look. Exotic? Maybe that wasn't the right word, but there was something about the Ryans' client that set her apart from the average citizen approaching their twilight years in Oldcastle. In that sense, she was exotic. Rosie tried not to let her sinking suspicions fog the hope she had built up this afternoon. But it wouldn't be the first time this happened. After all, it was Wishing Well House. She didn't want to transmit her flickering hope to her husband, and certainly wasn't going to mention to Victor her suspicion that Elsie was here on false pretences. The woman was off, and they both felt it. Elsie had an unnerving habit of staring at Rosie, but turning away when Rosie looked at her. Now that their client had clarified that she wasn't interested in the outdoor tour of the house, Victor wasn't sure what to do with himself. He was all geared up to show the woman the grounds of the property on Bucks Hill with the best view of Oldcastle. "Are you sure?" Rosie asked the woman. Elsie was in a world of her own, considering the front doors of the house. Rosie and Victor exchanged glances. Victor prompted, Elsie? She turned to them. Are you sure you don't want to see the exterior of the place? You know what I'd do if I was living here? I'd build a covered, heated swimming pool right on the edge of the property down there. Imagine yourself wallowing in the warm water, looking down on the town of Oldcastle while you sip a glass of wine. God, he's good, thought Rosie. She melted when witnessing her husband on full sell mode, dazzling prospective clients with a sparkling myriad of unique, shiny selling features. Her husband possessed a keen eye and had a sharp talent for latching onto clients' soft spots. Victor had overseen the exterior of the property while she had converted the interior of the house, turning the macabre feature in the room under the stairs into a unique selling feature. Maybe looking down at instead of down on Oldcastle, laughed Rosie. We're not that bad. Whoops, chuckled Victor. He turned to Elsie. I'm not from Oldcastle. I'm from a little hamlet in the middle of nowhere. I don't drink. Their client's sudden interruption startled Victor. Sorry? His smiley face fading. You mentioned wine. I do not drink. I like to have my wits about me. Anyone would think something was about to pop out and scare Elsie. Oh, Victor drew up. Well, a glass of Sprite then, flashing a cringe look at Rosie. As I've already mentioned, I'm more interested in the house itself. After all, it's where I'll be living. I won't be living out here or in the make-believe swimming pool. Victor told Rosie, if it's okay with you, I wouldn't mind heading back to the office to sort out a few things, prepare our viewings for Monday. How does that sound? To her own surprise, Rosie stalled for just a second. Yeah, she nodded. Fine. She flashed a curt smile. She could handle Elsie. Eccentric? Yes. Dangerous? No. The reality of the fact was that she stalled for a different reason. Nothing to do with the woman standing next to her. I can show Elsie around the property. We'll catch up later, she told her husband. Victor Ryan handed his card to Elsie. Call me night or day, Victor Ryan at your service. He flashed a pearly smile and left them. They watched Victor cross the gravelled driveway to his Porsche. Thunderheads coming in from the west caught Rosie's attention. A storm is coming, said the woman. Rosie nodded. We always pay back double for a week of sunshine. Victor Ryan got into his cherry-red Porsche Cayenne and drove off. Rosie clocked him glancing through the window. Beyond the glint of the sun on his door glass, she was sure her husband was giggling in that inimitable way of his. In that nanosecond, Rosie imagined how she must have looked, standing there with the odd lady, with a slight look of bemusement on her face. She smirked to herself. She would get her own back tonight when her imaginary evil self would lace Victor's wine with the extract of deadly nightshade. It was a darkly comic line they liked to use every now and again when they were at the dinner table, even when one of them wanted to get a little payback for something silly that had happened during the working day. A line they'd memorized when something along the lines of, Oh, I forgot to mention that I added tincture of atropa belladonna to your wine. A deadly nightshade to you. One of them would slip in this line after the other took a wholesome first sip from their wine glass. The paralysis should kick in shortly, dear. It was harmless fun. They shared a dark sense of humour. Others might call it a sick joke. Considering what lay in store for the Ryan family, sick irony was a better description. Let's get on with the tour, shall we? Elsie was eager to get inside the house. Rosie Ryan smiled, though the woman was rubbing her up the wrong way by now. As she crossed the threshold, she shivered when she felt something brush along her right shoulder. She turned around to see Elsie brushing something off her shoulder. The woman smiled. A little money, Spider. Oh, hopefully it'll make me rich. Rosie laughed and led Elsie into the cool, dark hallway. Things took an odd turn when Elsie stopped to unzip the leather bag hanging from her shoulder. 2. Room under the stairs. Rosie Ryan thought she was seeing things when her client pulled a snow-white cat out of her fancy boho shoulder bag. Like a mother cat carries her kitten, the woman pulled the feline out by the scruff of the neck, then placed the cat on the solid mahogany floor. The cat was wearing a harness, and Rosie's client took a retractable leash from the same bag and attached it to the loop of the harness on the cat's back. The pussy cat shook itself awake, then took in its surroundings with keen, striking eyes of different colours, blue and lime green. Rosie needed to tread carefully. I prefer if you kept the cat outside, if you don't mind. We're trying to keep the place as clean as possible for our other viewings. There were no other viewings. People didn't like the place. Superstitious might be a better adjective. I'm sure you understand. It's just that I know how cats can molt. I'm constantly traipsing around after Elisar at home with my little hand vacuum. With a sense of urgency, Elsie answered back, I'm not taking one more step into this dwelling without the cat. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ryan. That's just the way this is going to go. If you're interested in showing the property, then I suggest you turned a blind eye. For a second, the estate agent thought the woman was pulling her leg, but she sobered when she realised Elsie was being honest, holding her in her steady gaze in the low light of the hallway. The tranquil woman who had greeted them outside the doors was gone now. Inside the front doors, she appeared as if she'd prefer to be anywhere else. Rosie recalled how she'd felt the same way the first time she stepped into Wishingwell House, that unnerving dread that would sneak up on her just as she'd convinced herself she was merely being silly and paranoid. Of course, there wasn't anyone watching her, yet that's the feeling she got from time to time when she was in the house on her own. It was her imagination, but sometimes she couldn't override her instinct when the hairs would rise in her arms and her skin would inexplicably bristle. There were days, and there still are days, if Rosie was being honest with herself, when she busied herself about the place, trying to fool herself into thinking that she wasn't aware of that lingering presence and imaginary eyes looking out at her from impossible corners. It was the oddest sensation, but every time she stepped into the vacant house, she was looking at her own self as she busied herself about the empty property. It was as if she was the one, lurking in the house, spying on herself. The trick was to not think too much about the room under the stairs. That's when her breathing would go all wheezy on her, and the symptoms of asthma came on, yet she had outgrown the sporadic breathing difficulties she had in her younger years. It was ghost asthma, more psychological than physical. The woman who introduced herself as Elsie said, Look at the cat as a blind woman's guide dog. Yes, but you're not blind. Rosie thought about adding the succinct fact that the cat was not a dog, but that was overkill. That Elsie thought she could come waltzing in here as if it was her own house and do so as she pleased irked Rosie. But hello, Rosie wasn't going to lose a sale for the sake of a few cat hairs. We may have eyes, but we don't see everything. In that sense, we are blind, yes. Seeing isn't believing, Mrs. Ryan. Rosie didn't understand what the woman was getting at. She was expecting more from that outlandish statement, but nothing came. She couldn't get over the fact that their client was walking a cat on a leash, as if it really was a guide dog. I've never seen anyone take a cat for a walk before. Now, why didn't I think of that? Maybe I should take Elisar out for walks on a harness like this kitty. She asked their client, Oh, what's his name? Oh dear, he's a working cat. It was as if Rosie should have known what a working cat was. Elsie looked down the hallway, ready to begin the tour, but Rosie was too infatuated. Sorry for being nosy. Go on, ask your question. But we need to get on with the viewing, if you don't mind. My time is limited, and I need to check a few things. The real estate investor didn't know what those few things were that she needed to check. I'll make it fast. What exactly is a working cat, and why doesn't he have a name? He doesn't have a name, dear, because he doesn't need one. And if he did, he would hardly realize he had a name. This isn't a dumb dog, Mrs. Ryan. Felines are aloof creatures, sense and see what mere humans cannot. Naming cats is for the owner's benefit. Humans like to put tags on things to assure themselves they're in charge. Now Rosie felt like bringing up the dog analogy, but kept her mouth shut. Everything was clicking into place now. There was no doubt in Rosie's mind that Elsie was here for the room under the stairs. More specifically, what the room under the stairs contained. She was going to play along for now. Oh, okay. To fill the awkward moment of realization, she bent down to stroke the cat behind its ears, where Elisar liked to be caressed, but the feline hissed and bared its needle teeth. Oh! exclaimed Rosie, snapping her hand away. He's not friendly. This cat's only function is to work, Mrs. Ryan. A working cat. He's not used to being handled with love and care. Think of him as a machine. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to see the house. Rosie found this woman condescending, despite her easy way and that lovable old grin of hers. She showed Elsie around Wishingwell House. As they walked from room to room, Elsie's working cat prowled along at its master's feet. Rosie noticed how the woman nodded as she listened, but kept one eye close on her silently padding feline. She showed more interest in her cat than listening to the features of the house, until Rosie came on the subject of the previous owners of the property and how the house had been built sometime during the late Victorian period by a group of people she had little information on. Going by reports, the house on the hill had initially been built by a group of people rather than a single family or person. Rosie relayed how there was very little known about this secretive group of people, but from her research, they had built the house around the main feature in the room under the stairs. Elsie showed great interest in this. And then what happened to the house, Mrs. Ryan? The large group of people who built the house in the 1870s disappeared from the house, just upped and left. It was abandoned, caught up in red tape until squatters moved into the place. They took up residency here at the property until, just like the first group of people who built the house, vacated the place for no apparent reason. The state reclaimed the house, and that's when Victor and I purchased the property and reformed the place. And that's where Rosie Ryan abruptly finished her little history lesson of the house, now known as Wishingwell House. Elsie inspected every room, as did the working cat, but Rosie noticed something odd. She would lead her client to the key features of the room, but the woman was more interested in the featureless areas of the rooms, paying particular attention to the ceiling corners and any rooms with high ceilings and beams or rafters, and it gave Rosie the creeps. What are you looking for? She turned to Rosie with that serene smile. Mould. You won't find any. Rosie led Elsie through the house, first floor, second floor, and the enormous attic that had once functioned as a meeting room of some description. Rosie didn't have information on this area of the house, which resembled a little church. They called it the chapel. Besides the room under the stairs, this was the only room that gave Rosie the heebie-jeebies. Maybe it was the small altar and all those empty lined-up chairs waiting forever to have someone sit in them. She never found out what this room was dedicated to. Perhaps it was the not knowing that unnerved her. She knew so much and yet so little about the house. Anyone could Google the address of this place and learn of the horror. But there were so many secrets the house had taken to its grave in the room under the stairs. 45 minutes later, downstairs in the main hallway, Rosie's client stopped dead. Head cocked, the lady looked about her as if she had just heard something, her eyes sweeping the area. She peered down at the cat. At the same time, Rosie noticed how the feline froze, a taxidermy cat poised on a mantelpiece. The feline's slit eyes fixed on the only door to a room at the end of a narrow hallway, and the only room they hadn't visited. The warm smile and glow that Elsie emitted was long gone now. A dark cloud came over the woman. That was a cliché, but that's what it felt like for Rosie Ryan. Just like those dark grey clouds that were looming in overhead before a torrential downpour. In that brief moment, Rosie knew that Elsie knew, and had known from the first moment they met her. "You could have just asked me, and I would have shown you. The well isn't a secret, but we're not going to advertise the story that surrounds it either, and the law backs us up on that. I know why you're here. Your type comes round here posing as potential buyers." "And what's my type?" "A dark tourist." "I don't know what that is." "Dark tourism involves places where death and tragedy have occurred." A wide smile bloomed on Elsie's face. "Death doesn't have to be tragic. Death can be a triumph, not a tragedy." Rosie didn't understand what her client meant by that, and nor did she care. She was here to sell the house. Psychoanalyzing and existentialism would be for later over a glass of wine. Her mind was on the house, this house with a deep, deep secret. Once upon a time it was possible to hide the history of any building with a checkered past, but a quick search would reveal the wishing well's murky life. "The price of the property is reflected in the property's story," said Rosie, deliberately skirting around the real reason why the immense property was on the market for less than half of its market value. She concluded, "Every old house has its secrets." "But I haven't opened my mouth, dear. There is nothing you can tell me about this property that I don't know already. I'm just here to see the place." She looked about the hallway with a hint of reminiscence. Anyone would think this wasn't Elsie's first time in the house. "Have you been here before?" Rosie asked, as an unexpected flutter of nerves wriggled in her chest. "I just want to check things over." What things?" Rosie tried to appear nonchalant about the topic, but she had too much time invested in this place. "It has been a while since anybody lived here. I just want to assure myself that everything is as it should be." Rosie's eyes crept to the frozen cat. The feline appeared to be caught in a glitch, but looking closer, Rosie could see the pulse of its nostrils, sniffing at whatever miasma emanated down the hallway towards them from the room under the stairs. "May I see the well? You walked me through every square inch of the house, but you haven't shown me the wishing well, your unique selling feature." "If you're here to waste our time, then I prefer to win this now. We've put a lot of time, effort and money into this property." Rosie asked, "What's the name of your YouTube channel? I'll subscribe." "My tube?" Rosie laughed. Oh, come on. If you're not a," flashing ear commas, "dark tourist, then you must have a YouTube channel or something. TikTok? Instagram?" "I don't follow Mrs. Ryan." "We get this every few months. Let's call them independent journalists or investigators who want to get a guided tour of Wishing Well House under the pretense that they are potential buyers, only to have their hidden camera experience uploaded onto their social media, monetized social media." "I'm not one of those," she assured Rosie. "My client is interested in the house." "Wait, you're not the potential buyer?" She shook her head. "I'm here on behalf of the interested group. Now, could you show me the well? Thank you." The boho lady stared at the door leading into the room at the end of the tapering hallway. A part of Rosie wanted to tell the woman to find the well herself and jump into it when she finds it. "Please, no pictures or videos. Do me the courtesy. We're trying to make the well stigma disappear and promote the fresh new wishing well." She felt Elsie's eyes on her while she fetched a key from the large bunch of keys from her handbag. "Besides bathrooms, this is the only door in the house that is locked due to safety reasons. The well, the wishing well, is a feature of the house, but it's not a plaything for children." The fact of the matter was that Rosie kept it locked for her own safety, her mental well-being, if nothing else. The real estate investor had spent many hours converting the well from a hazardous hole in the ground to something more appealing to the eye, but she never felt easy in the room under the stairs. Whatever tainted the atmosphere in that room would stay in that room, and Rosie always locked the door just to have that peace of mind and the illusion of control over the room. Rosie unlocked the door. It swung open on its well-oiled hinges. The room was in darkness. Rosie paused a little before going inside and pulling up the window shutter to let in some light. As opposed to the walnut finish in the hallway, these walls were bare, solid concrete, a feature that had always remained a mystery to Rosie, and she said as much to her client. "Steel door, and concrete walls in the room under the stairs. No other room in the house has these features. I left them as I thought they gave the place a quirky feel. It could very well be a mistake, who knows? They are the original concrete walls and steel door from the Victorian period. Very few houses in that period, and in this area, were using concrete at the time. It would be a sin to rip them out. She turned back to the woman still standing in the hallway. Strangely, it wasn't the ring of old stones surrounding a hole in the middle of the floor. It was the window that enthralled Elsie. The window. Rosie considered the window. Yes, double glazed. How long has it been there? Elsie asked this question as if she remembered this room without the window. Rosie's suspicions were growing. She informed her client that they had installed the window about 18 months back to allow light into the room and take away the metaphorical and literal darkness that consumed the place. She clicked open the window to let some fresh air into the stuffy room, and this is where Rosie paused, sucked into the time warp of her youth, transported back to that first night in July when they came across the door after breaking into the very house they stood in now. They might not have ever noticed the room under the stairs if it wasn't for the unusual steel door, which wasn't locked on that night, but was rusted and jammed due to not being used. That's why quick-tempered Dave kicked the door in. She could see him right now, going apeshit. She felt the ghost asthma tightening in her lungs. And you keep this door locked? Why so? Rosie noticed how the cat's heterochromic eyes stayed focused on the room. Children's safety, Rosie lied. Be honest, dear. Because I don't like the place. The boho lady nodded and smiled. Why? This was feeling like a psychiatric patient interview. A few reasons. Care to name a few? Asked Rosie's client. She didn't care to name a few, but it felt right. The well, and what those kids found down there. She deliberately omitted the fact that those kids were her best friends, and she should have been one of those kids that night. That's a long time ago, Mrs. Ryan. I know, but, she stalled, sometimes I don't feel alone in that room. I feel like someone's watching me. Who? She stalled. Well, me. Elsie stiffened. I don't understand. Rosie had a sneaking suspicion the woman understood, but wanted her to expand on the topic. This is going to sound weird. Rosie took a deep breath, realizing she needed to get this off her chest. She had never spoken to Victor about it. Was it a good idea to tell this to a prospective client? I'm watching myself walking about the house while trying to convince myself, literally, into thinking there's nobody watching me. But it's useless. I'm watching me. There's nothing I can do to fool myself into thinking otherwise. Elsie walked about the room, eyeing the cat, inspecting areas Rosie couldn't understand, surveyed the walls, paying particular attention to the corners of the ceilings where the spiders looked down on them from their multiple eyes. She turned and peered down into the darkness of the ancient shaft, so far down that the bottom of the well wasn't visible. Have you seen this? Rosie followed Elsie's pointing finger. She knelt down and squinted to see the small symbol carved into one rock. You know what? I've looked into this well lots of times, and I've never seen that until now. She got her phone and switched on the flashlight for a closer inspection. She clearly made out 3 spirals spiraling into one. What is it? It's a tri-spiral, Celtic symbol, answered Elsie. It intrigued Rosie. How had she not seen this before? Really, what does it mean? Elsie looked like someone who would understand this stuff. It's an ancient Celtic symbol known as the spiral of life. Life, death, and rebirth. Rosie was impressed. Elsie lifted her left hand to show Rosie the silver ring on her forefinger with the same symbol. I make jewellery in my spare time. That symbol is widely used. I sell these pieces online. That's the only reason I know about the tri-spiral. The woman's eyes crept back to the gaping black mouth on the floor. I thought it would be sealed, gesturing to the well, considering its history. It was sealed, but I had one of the crew open it. I think it's unique. It's a shame to have it hidden, despite what happened. A farmer friend of ours dedicated the granite rock from his wall. I built it up myself with the help of my builder. I wanted to make it look like a proper wishing well. Elsie considered her. So you opened the well instead of keeping it hidden? Instead of changing the name of the house to something less conspicuous, you name it Wishingwell House. It almost sounds as if you're glorifying the place." "Yes, but I wanted a special selling feature. I am a businesswoman." "So you glorified the sour well." The woman's choice of words gave Rosie pause for thought. "At the risk of alienating the house and a sale, you prefer to expose the well. You rebadged the house as Wishingwell House, even adding well into the title." She smiled at Rosie. It was becoming apparent that her client was leading her somewhere with this. "What's your point?" "I think it's staring you in the face." Elsie said no more. Without looking back, she left the room under the stairs and walked down the narrow hallway to the front doors. Before she stepped outside, she unzipped her shoulder bag, then picked up her cat by the scruff of its neck and dropped the feline into the boho leather bag, then zipped it closed. Rosie took that as her cue to drop the shutters and lock the heavy door behind her. When she caught up with her client, Elsie told her, "I've seen everything I need to see. We will meet again." Elsie flashed a smile, then left. She walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath her feet. "What an odd woman," thought Rosie. Then something else dawned on her. The woman didn't have a car. They were out here in the middle of the countryside. She scanned the landscape leading down from Bucks Hill and along the New Line Road for a parked car, but there weren't any. "Can I give you a lift into town?" she called. "It's still hot out." Over her shoulders, Elsie called, "I don't like cars, but thank you." She waved and walked off into the hot evening. She tracked the woman until she shimmered in the heat with the rest of the landscape. When she disappeared from view, Rosie Ryan felt vulnerable and alone. She would have liked to see Victor coming up the driveway in his Porsche Cayenne just then. As she locked the front doors of Wishingwell House, it dawned on her that the woman looked vaguely familiar. Or maybe Elsie just had one of those faces that seemed familiar. Rosie sat into her stifling Volvo and made a few notes in her work agenda. The date at the top of the page caught her attention. 14th of July. This very night 3 decades ago changed her life forever. As she reflected on that, she glimpsed herself in her rear-view mirror. The woman who looked back at her wasn't Rosie, but someone who looked very like her. Her eyes edged to her left shoulder, half expecting to see that tiny money spider creeping up towards her neck. As she switched on the Volvo's engine and drove off, she remembered why she stalled when Victor had told her he was going back to the office. Everything was taken care of for Monday. There was nothing outstanding. Maybe her husband had used that line just to get away from the peculiar woman. Or maybe it was an excuse to get back to the office for a different reason. As Rosie Ryan pulled onto the New Line Road, her daughter's gym teacher called her.